Thank you very much, everyone, for joining our webinar today. This is a 5-part webinar series where we talk about the various phases of automations or areas within an automation program. Today, we're going to be talking about optimizing your automation program. We're going to be talking a lot about how to measure what your program is doing, how to monitor what your program is doing, how to monitor your automation, so on and so forth. With that, I would like to introduce everyone on the call today. My name is Ahmed Zaidi. I'm the CEO here at Accelirate. I'm your host and MC for the afternoon. I have with me the Robotic Operations Center Director. We call it the ROC. So Kyle Wilson manages the ROC. And it's not the rock in the middle of off the coast of San Francisco, but it sometimes feels like that for him. Kyle Wilson is responsible for managing all our monitoring and support operations. And I'm extremely excited to have Amir Abbasi with us. He's the senior sales engineer with a partner of ours, UiPath. We're national diamond partners with UiPath. Amir, welcome and glad to have you on. Kyle, if you can start with your introduction, followed by Amir, and then we'll get into the program.
Sure. So again, my name is Kyle Wilson. I'm the Robotic Operations Center Director here at Accelirate, and I ensure proper implementation of support methodologies to our clients and assist ultimately in the optimization of the automation programs. So today we'll get again into a little bit of our methodology as well as some of the tools that we use within UiPath itself, where Amir will cover a little bit more of that. But to get started, I'll just start to focus here on our automation management, monitoring, and support, and how that ultimately will optimize your program. So when it comes to automation monitoring and support, after the automations have already been discovered and developed, we move into the capture and sustain phase where monitoring and support comes into play. So once these automations are built, they're pushed to production, the job is not complete. It's crucial to make sure that within the capture and sustain phases that we're ensuring that these automations are achieving their expected ROI, that they are steadily improving as new features and functionalities become available. In these next few slides, we'll discuss the methodology and importance of this to optimizing your program. So first, again, the goal here for monitoring and support is to provide an organized way of handling all the aspects of production processes, like enhancement ideas, dashboards, bugs, credentials, process changes, etc. And by establishing a methodology here, this lets your developers focus more on the development and building these new processes and allows the support to handle the management of processes that are already in production for you. And ultimately, this will lead to a faster automation delivery, reduce your backlog of incidents and automation changes, and provide structure to allow your automation program to continue growing and increasing return on investment and ultimately user satisfaction. So what we mean again by automation monitoring, I'll go in more specifics here, is the process of ensuring that every automation you have in production is completing successfully, either when it's scheduled or when it's manually triggered. And why we have these monitoring procedures in place is so ultimately we can reduce negative business impact and any automation downtime, maximize your bot utilization, and provide peace of mind to business users and process owners. So what should monitoring cover? And really, we have a methodology of covering 3 aspects to any automation that's in production, where we're looking at pre-processing, so ensuring that your bots have everything that it needs to run correctly, including the environments, virtual machines, memory, RAM, CPU, overall performance. The inputs, so making sure that the data is in the proper format for processing, assets and credentials, so making sure your automations have access to the proper folder paths and applications that it needs for processing, and robot statuses, so making sure that all of your robots are online and connected to run the processes. Ultimately, the tools that we have for doing this pre-processing monitoring is utilizing UiPath activities to make checks prior to your process run, virtual machine dashboards that will allow for visibility, and the UiPath orchestrator. Next is the during processing. So here we want to make sure that when the bot is running, that is performing the expected tasks. So here we can utilize tools like Kibana Elasticsearch dashboards, emails and alerts, UiPath orchestrator to monitor for specific error logs or fatal messages, any bots that might be stuck in an infinite loop, bots that might be stuck in not proceeding forward on its own. Maybe there's high amounts of technical or application exceptions, and these transactions can be monitored in real time using the orchestrator through UiPath or Kibana Elasticsearch to determine if any automations need to be stopped during its processing. Finally, we have our post-processing, where we want to make sure that we're getting the right outcome that the bot has completed. So here we want to make sure that we're reviewing the outputs like emails, folder paths, output files for correct completion, or reviewing transaction results. And this can be done through Insights, which provides you a view of where transactions were processed, how many were successful versus failed, what was the time taken to complete your transactions. And we can also utilize the orchestrator to take a look at the orchestrator queues to be used for this function, but this won't provide you a visualization. It will give you the statuses of those transactions. So I know I'm going pretty quickly, but I did want to stop and see if there are any questions, or Ahmed, you want me to continue going through until we get to Amir?
No, I think this is important, and as it may seem like we're talking about some nuts and bolts, but how this really ties into optimization is really, at the end of the day, there are multiple types of optimizations, right? You have optimizations of reduction in errors that are coming out through the bots, optimization in bot utilization, optimizations of execution of processes. I think the most critical portion about optimization is the measurement aspect of it, because you cannot optimize things that you cannot measure. I think that's a critical piece of it. So I think this is good, and Kyle's been mentioning a few things that might be not common terms: Kibana, Elasticsearch, Orchestrator, Insights. We will get into all of those. Absolutely, we will get to those. And I am seeing the questions. Definitely, we'll get to these questions as well along the line and along the way. And if we don't answer anything, feel free to ask them at the end as well. Continue on, Kyle, please.
Okay, great. So the next portion here is incident management. So what is incident management? In our terms, it's the process of managing automation issues and failures from end to end. And why we're doing this is we want to make sure to keep track of all of these observed issues and failures in order to keep business users informed of the statuses of their process. Now, this is very important to the automation program as it expands, because we want to make sure that we're keeping the automations functional and provide users comfort in knowing that they have stable automations that they can use day in and day out. And if they have any issues, there are people available to assist with any of the observations that they're seeing. So we provide a methodology and a framework around how we do incident management. So I'll just cover this on a high level, where first we're identifying and responding to any automation issues and failures. And this will come through our monitoring activities. So we'll be utilizing alerts, dashboards, UiPath orchestrator, and insights. And again, your teams might be utilizing these as well, and just giving you some information on how you would do so. Next would be to inform users or respond to any user requests. So making sure that there is constant communication whenever there is assistance needed. Next is to make sure you're creating work items in an incident management system, such as ServiceNow or Jira or Microsoft Lists, whatever tool your organization decides to use, as long as, again, it's keeping track of what's occurring, because this can be used to analyze trends and identify identify what automations might need more attention, what issues that we're seeing most often, and how can we reduce the frequency of this occurring. Next is performing a root cause analysis, so determine where any issues lie. A lot of the times it's simply environment related and we might have to restart a machine, but it could also be input asset credential related, code related, or platform related. And that's why it's important to determine the root cause of any issue that's being seen. Next is to track the status, so making sure that we understand when the automation will be available to run, what will be needed to allow this automation to run, and how long has this issue been ongoing for. Finally, we get to a resolution where everything is back up and running and working in production as intended, and this may provide enhancement opportunities to be identified to, again, reduce future issues or incidents that occur. So an efficient incident management methodology allows for business continuity and then more confidence within your RPA program, which in turn helps optimize overall your automation program.
Kyle, this was
So
awesome. I think one of the big things that I am always looking at from the reports that Kyle's group generates for us and our customers every week. The incident management portion of support is critical because it informs both the defect bug fixing priority as well as enhancement priorities. There are numerous times where Kyle's group will identify issues and then categorize them and say the top 10 issues within your automations are these. And this is what they contribute to in terms of support effort. If we were to fix this one issue, you would reduce your support effort by this much. If you were to make this enhancement into the automation to check for this box because of which it fails, so on and so forth. So I think these incident management tools, regardless of what you use, I think it's extremely important to keep a track of what issues are coming up, what was the eventual resolution of it. Not only do they serve as the knowledge base for the rest of the team, they also help inform your enhancement roadmap as well as your bug fixes. So this is critical to optimizing your automations in production. I think Kyle will agree that our clients find this very, very helpful.
Absolutely, and you really set the stage for the next slide, which is going to be enhancements. So when it comes to enhancements or change management, RPA solutions can sometimes be sensitive to changes within the applications, environments, or the logic. So it's important to have change management procedures in place in order to optimize the automations that you already have in production. So we have a 4-step methodology to this, and the first is to identify a change trigger. So whether that be adding a new feature or adding logic to your automation, maybe an application that the automation uses is being upgraded, or there's changes to the website or application, and that will require us to make changes or you to make changes in your code to avoid any business disruptions. Or maybe there's an increase in volume in the future. You know that, hey, in a few months, we're going to have X amount more transactions or items to process, and that will need to be accounted for as well. So identifying a change trigger is really the first step. Next is you want to perform an impact analysis to see what are the benefits and level of effort required to actually make these changes. Who is going to make these changes? How many modules need to be changed within the code? What is required to test for these changes? And ultimately, what's the success criteria that we're trying to achieve by implementing these enhancements or changes? And once that impact analysis has been completed and approved, then the teams can get to work on developing and testing those changes. So after the development has been completed and our test results have been confirmed, then the processes can be pushed to production and monitored to make sure that the proposed benefits are achieved from those changes. Now, tools that we can use for implementation and to measure effectiveness of these changes are UiPath Orchestrator, because you'll need to push packages and you're able to monitor as well within the orchestrator. UiPath Insights, so this allows you to look at the ROI or KPIs of these changes that have occurred. UiPath Studio, so this is where the development of these changes actually occurs on a code level. UiPath Test Suite, so this can test applications prior to any changes being proposed or implemented. And the UiPath AI Center for optimization of data structures and finding other enhancement opportunities. So in a nutshell, it's important that we're tracking these as well in a change management tool like ServiceNow, Jira, or List, and that these process documentations are also updated so that the knowledge is not lost as these improvements and enhancements are being made. And so also we can track them for ROI purposes as well. And we recommend utilizing a separate support team not to bother the other developers. So ultimately they can remain focused on the creation of new automations to the program and not necessarily always working on the ones that are already in production.
That's actually an interesting point that you make, Kyle, there. One of the unique things that we have discovered, and we've been practitioners of this ever since our rock opened up. We put some of the bug fixes and minor enhancements into our support team, and we're able to do that because our support folks, like Kyle, are all product certified and almost developers in the platform. What that allows you to do is that allows you to keep your development team focused on their new automations, whereas these folks who are the most familiar with the operation of the automation as well as the bugs that are coming out are then able to quickly fix those bugs, go through the same change management procedure. However, they're able to also you're able to maintain the velocity of new application development and reduce that context switching that the developers have to do, going from the thing that they were doing back to something that they developed 6 months ago, and then going back to doing the new thing. I think that's a much optimal way of addressing changes to your automations. Of course, large changes and overhauls still need to go through the development team, but minor changes and bug fixes can be handled within your support team. And I think that is a very efficient way of being able to handle your support changes. If that's not happening, generally speaking, a generic support team really just looks at the issue, goes through the run book that they've provided, and then the next call is to the developer saying, hey, your automation is not working, which kind of creates the same problem that you were trying to solve from the monitoring piece anyways. Your developers are back doing L2 and L3 support in investigating the issues and fixing the issues.
Mm-hmm. All right, exactly. So my final piece here is on dashboards and reporting. So it's important to have tools available to analyze the performance and the return on investment of your production automations. We recommend two different types of dashboards and reports. The first one being your business dashboards, and this will include information regarding your robot and process utilization. So asking yourself, am I using my licenses efficiently? Historical job run performance, are my processes failing? And if so, at what rate? Is the failure rate increasing? Is it decreasing? Transaction history, so what percentage of my transactions are successful versus failed, and am I seeing any increases or decreases in those trends? And finally, the most important is your time and dollar savings or your return on investment for each process and the program as a whole. So identifying what processes and departments are saving the most money and what automations might need to be reviewed to add more additional functionality to increase that number. Secondly is the operations dashboards, and these are more utilized by support and operations teams for real-time monitoring and analysis, where the focus is here more on insights into the errors and failures that are being observed and what processes that they're happening on, transaction statuses, so how are my transactions being processed in real time, process summary, how many of my automations are currently running right now, what are my peak hours of operation and what's the success rate of my processes? And finally, machine status. So are there any machines or robots that are unresponsive that I need to go and take a look at? And ultimately, we use tools like UiPath Insights, again, the orchestrator and Kibana and Elasticsearch to build these dashboards. and they can be customized to your liking, depending on what information that you're looking for specifically. There are default out-of-the-box dashboards that do come with this, but again, we can get more customized. And this is where I'll start to lean more on Amir to talk further about these tools and how they can be utilized as well. So the
Perfect.
final slide is just an example of what the errors and failures might look like and transaction statuses from Kibana and Elasticsearch. Amir has some more information again on what it looks like in some of the other tools, but just wanted to give an example of some operations dashboards that we utilize within support here at Accelirate.
Perfect, Kyle. When I usually show this slide, I tend to joke that no conversation about dashboards is really complete without pictures. I think the most important slide was the slide before it. There was also a question by Deborah. She was wondering from a support perspective, how do we do this, whether the current help desk has the support controller. So we recommend a specialized support operation for RPA automations. It could be within the help desk as well, but generally we recommend that you do a specialized support team, because at the end of the day, help desk can do some of this stuff, but it ends up being back in the developer's court if the people who are supporting the automations aren't specialized. As to the question of who gets to see the controller, multiple people and different organizations do it differently. People expose the controller, if you may, which is called the orchestrator, in which Amir will show you in a little bit. They're in the hands of the business. That they can view their queue statuses and some of the dashboards. They're in the hands of of some of the support folks. All of the support folks have access to those. Some development folks who are designated to be L3 support also get that access. But as you go through as Amir goes through the orchestrator and insights, you'll see more of what's available and and various organizations make that decision internally based on their support structure.
Right. All right, so Amir, I will allow you to speak further upon optimization and the tools that you use over at UiPath.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, and take over from here.
I will pause.
All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Amir Abbasi. I'm a senior sales engineer with UiPath. I've been here for about 3 years. So I've seen quite a bit of changes in our platform, and hopefully you guys have, one, come to know about those changes, and two, enjoyed the benefits of some of those upgrades over the years. So my portion today is to talk a little bit more about this managed bracket. If you've seen any UiPath presentation, we like to talk about this because there are different ways that we think in terms of personas and the types of tools in our platform that they would be aligned to. Now, if we're talking about the two today, we're mainly talking about one, management, and two, how to get some good analytics over what your automations are actually doing for you as a business. And we do that through two things. One, there's Orchestrator, obviously, right? Our centralized tool that not only manage your operations, things like licenses, who have access to what, setting up scheduled jobs and such, but Orchestrator also has some nice monitoring features that we'll talk about in a second. And then secondly, from a business perspective, right? We've had some mention here of Elastic and Kibana. Those are great for the live type of reporting that you might want when you're looking at how your operations are running functionally throughout the day. Insights is also a tool that UiPath has created specifically to look at how historically your automation program is running. And so we'll take a look at some of the dashboards that come there as well. So let's start out with that. So the two questions that we like to answer with the Insights product, right, looking back at history, is how do you define and gather information on your key performance indicators for your organization? And how do you intend to do this for your automation program? So these two questions are important because if you look at number one, right, in the last 10 years, there's been quite a bit of a transformation in terms of organizations doing more business intelligence, right? Taking data that they were gathering and making sense of it. There are a lot of popular tools out there today, the Tableaus, the Power BIs, numerous dashboarding tools, the Cabanas now, and the Elastics of the world that help you accomplish that when it comes to generalized business KPIs. But when it comes to automation programs, what I've found over the last couple of years is that people don't really do this, right? They either do it or they're doing it very poorly. They're either tracking things haphazardly through Excel, or they're saying generally, I think I'm saving about this much time. And as Amit from one of our attendees has mentioned, he says, I look at my robots as workers. They come in and they clock out, right? And that's how we think about it at UiPath as well. We like to think of robots as being actual digital workers, right? They come into work and you assign them work and they do it. The great thing is we don't pay them overtime and they don't necessarily sleep. So we want to make sure that we're getting the most use out of them. So 3 things we're trying to solve for here. We're trying to measure your RPA deployment. We're trying to optimize your processes by understanding, some analytics around it, and then understanding what to fine tune. And by doing that, you scale your program, right? And we do all of that through this product that we call Insights to get you those analytics very quickly, right? So this product here, Insights, comes with some pre-built dashboards, right? These are meant to be templates that you can customize, so they have a lot of functionality. And there are about 6 of them that are set up for you from the get-go, right? And we'll talk about each one and I'll show you the product live in a second. So the first one is all about robots. So if you ever wondered, what are my attended bots doing? What are my unattended bots doing? How much time are they running for? What's the average utilization of those types of robots throughout the day? This will tell you everything about those robots. We have one specifically around processes, right? So, how many processes have I run today? How much have my robots completed? Which ones are successful? Which ones am I seeing are faulting or being stopped, right? So a lot of good information about the health of your processes. If you utilize queues, which I'll talk a little bit about towards the end of this, then there's one specifically around queues, right? We find queues are very powerful way of doing your high transaction type processes, and we have a dashboard dedicated to that. This is probably on the radar of everyone, right? For executives, they want to make decisions on, should we invest more into this program? So there's one specifically tied to ROI, and we'll take a look at the calculations that are used to get you the ROI. And so this will help you understand how much money are you saving through some of these automations. And then there are 2 more. So one is around licensing. I find this is particularly helpful as you continue to adopt more. So if you're growing your program, and let's say you're foraying into something like citizen development, right? Where you want more of your users to get involved in building tidbits of automation that your organization can use. Well, then utilization is important. I want to know how many of my licenses are actually being used, who might be logging in throughout the day and actually utilizing it, and do I need more licenses, right? And so this is a very helpful tool, dashboard tool for that. And then finally, there's one around long-running workflows. Now, this isn't something that we include. It is there. You can download it from the marketplace. Not everyone uses it, and so we don't just have it there when you install the package, because naturally you'll have a lot of questions on, shouldn't this dashboard be showing something? So unless you're actually using something in the action center around long-running workflows, this dashboard won't be too helpful. But if you are, it helps normalize some of that information that the robots are doing in terms of long-running workflows. Okay. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to preface this by saying that Insights is all, like the rest of the UiPath platform, is always going through different changes, and you'll see. There are going to be different versions of this. The version I'm showing here is for the on-premise version. But the idea is that today, that Insights piece is launched here in my Orchestrator. Now, if I go to Orchestrator, you'll notice that there are specific roles that I can assign users specifically to be a designer or viewer. Now, this is always the first question, right? Am I going to be someone who's building dashboards for my business? Or am I just going to be someone who's consuming it, right? Maybe I'm part of the business unit. So you have distinct roles for both. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and go into my Insights module. Now, as a designer and someone who builds this often, I have a lot of different dashboards here, right? Now, if I go into this and I'm a designer, I will have the ability to go ahead and edit these. Now, again, a lot of these out of the box will be set up when you first set up your Insights instance. And I could see, those ones here because I've tagged, when I created this instance, I've tagged those as being created with an admin account. So I can see which ones are my base templates. And typically what best practice dictates is if I want to change anything on these, customize it to make it my own, I'll just go ahead, edit them, and make a duplicate over here. You'll see I've already done that to the left. So I can logically create these dashboards, duplicate them, put them into their own folders. If you at your business like to do it by business unit, you can create folders by business unit, and whatever sort of makes sense as far as an organization method goes for your company. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these. We'll start out here with the processes one, because this one I naturally opened. But we'll see here, I get some high level information, and this is all coming from Orchestrator. Now, what's happening is this isn't necessarily live data, right? This is almost live. So we're getting a small delay, let's say about 15 to 30 minutes on some of this. And what happens is this is going to come in and tell me all the information that I need to know about how my program is running. So I can come in here and see that we've run 206,946 processes. That's a nice big number. Amongst those processes, the average runtime is about 2 minutes, 9 seconds. The slowest is around 22 minutes or so. The success rate here is about 96%, which is great amongst that many jobs. And then I could look at my top 10 processes. So I can see which ones are successful, which ones are faulted. And the nice thing about this is they're dynamic. So as I click here, you'll see it applies filters, global filters to the right? There's the job state faulted, and all my numbers here change accordingly, right? And so you could set those up to the widgets that you'd like to change based on selections. I have things like top 10 processes of faulted jobs, weekly runs, and any sort of error details that I might want to see are captured below. So for each process, I can see which robots, when they errored, what the reason code for the error was, and how many times it errored out. So this is a great way for me to determine what is going on with my processes. Okay, moving on. And I'm gonna move a little bit faster on some of these because it starts to get a little redundant in terms of the messaging, but just different ways for me to slice and dice my data. So I have one around robots here. I can see the total number of hours for unattended, what my utilization per day is. You can configure this as needed to be 8-hour days or 24-hour days. Typically for unattended, they're going to run 24 hours a day because you'll have some processes that run overnight and some that run in the morning while you're in operation. Attended is usually 8. I unfortunately don't have any folks using any attended here, otherwise this would populate. But then you can also see things like robot types, utilization per day, and you can have different breakdowns, top 10 robots with errors, and I can go ahead and investigate further why these robots are erroring out. So lots of information here, what the busiest robots by process are, right? Which ones are taking up most of my robots' time? Do I need to reconfigure that? Should I rebuild the process if it's transaction heavy so that it uses queues so that more robots can work on it quicker? Those are the types of decisions I would make by looking at some of this dashboards here. And then finally, we'll have information down here that will give you the breakdown of when your robots are being utilized. Now, this is obviously an anomaly, right? I'm seeing 2 huge ones here. Maybe someone's testing something out in my instance here, and they're doing a very long process, right? Or maybe it's doing thousands of transactions. So this means that this robot is fully utilized throughout the day for this process. Now, in a normal course of business, I might see all of my robots here, and I'll see what hours of day that robot was being utilized. And I want to see if there's any natural breaks where my robots aren't being utilized, right? As then I could determine if there's other processes that fit those gaps where I can have that robot being used. So all of this information can be viewed in some of these dashboards here.
Amir, I think the business ROI is probably the one that people ask for most.
Sure.
This is interesting, by the way, as Amir just showed you the robots. I think from an optimization standpoint, I always love seeing that Microsoft Outlook scheduling type view of my robots, because then I can very quickly see where my open times are, where I can slot in other robots and I can optimize more. So that's really cool. Amir, this is I think this is new, because we built this before you guys did.
Yeah, we take a lot of suggestions from customers. These last two ones, follow sort of the same logic. So there's one around queues, tell you everything about transactions, how many queues you got, how many transactions amongst those queues. And the most important thing here is a nice little summary of if those queues are running into application errors, right? Things like maybe you're trying to automate on a website, the website is down, you'll get an application error, or is it a business exception, right? Hey, this is over a certain amount that the robot can process, needs to be thrown as an exception and routed to a human to approve. And so we can see some of that information here. As I mentioned before, there's one around licensing, right? This is incredibly hard information to get otherwise, but we have it here so that you can see the breakdowns by, and this is taking a second, breakdowns by your robots, but most importantly, we have one around ROI as well. So I'm just going to flip to that and hopefully, let's see, I don't know if that's my internet. Okay. Let's go ahead.
Demo, Amir.
Yeah, it's always, we always get a little bit of demo magic. All right, so there's the licensing one, and then we'll go to the ROI one, because I'm sure this is what you guys are interested in. So this will tell me everything about ROI. Now, a lot of these calculations are going to be pretty rudimentary. What they're based off of is this process baseline in the beginning, right? So what we do is we take a look at all of the processes that you're interested in. This will bring in all of the process names. For each process name, you could specify how much manual time it would take you to do a transaction of that and what your hourly cost might be for that transaction. Now, those are the two default fields. You can see I've added some other fields to make it a little bit more palatable in terms of I might have multiple people doing this. So I might add FTEs, I might add things like the license cost, and I might add things like the fringe benefits for people doing this as well to my calculations. It's going to take all of this information, determine how much time robots have worked and automated this process and what the average runtime for those processes are, and then multiply it by what it would have taken you if you had just done this manually. And what it does is it then spits out the ROI. So you can see at a very high level, had you done the same process that you've automated manually, what it would have cost you versus how much you're saving by having robots do those processes instead. So I have things like the money saved, the time saved. If you have a goal, you can specify that here, and so forth and so on. So you'll have that breakdown here, and I could see that by day based on when those processes are running on each day as well.
So Amir, that was although you've shown a lot of the built-in dashboards, this is really an analytics platform for all the data coming out of your robots. You literally have access to the full data model behind it, all queues, all transactions, all jobs, process runs, job runs, faults, pretty much everything that's in Orchestrator you have access to here. So if something, there were a couple of questions. I think David asked a question around, hey, what if all automations don't follow the same metrics? For example, I'll give you a good example. We have queue transactions, and we batch up the transaction, and every transaction on the queue literally represents about 100 individual transactions because it's a batch. And because we need to report on an individual transaction average handle time, we have to really divide the handle time of that thing by 100 so that we can do that. And we use insights, and we're able to do that custom calculation within insights to provide that. So it's very easy to add. So there's a couple of things. I think, Dave, you asked the question of how easy it is to add new automations. I think it's a multifaceted answer to that. Some of the things, for example, in a lot of our best practices, we always say, hey, use queues regardless of what you do, even if it's a single large transaction, batch type transaction, use queues, right? So even it's a big manipulation of a single Excel spreadsheet, what we end up doing is we use a queue. This way we have a standard dashboard that can look for a queue per job, and then we're able to report off of that. So some of that is using standard methodologies. And then some of it is you can't get away from custom stuff for very specific automations, and your Insights allows you the ability to do that.
Absolutely. So you can definitely change everything here to be looking at queues and the per transaction. The way I have it here is by process. Matter of fact, if I have some time at the end, I'll show you, but for the newer versions of Insights that we're going to release in the next couple of months, you'll see that it's a pretty quick transition. So if I wanted to do ROI calculations by queues, I can go ahead and just flip a button, and this would be looking at the per transaction ROI instead of the per process. So those are definitely things that are not unique to you, but definitely things that have been requested by the group as well. And to Ahmed's point here is, there's a lot that goes on, but at the end of the day, this information is all coming from your program. And so tools like Insights can be used to build out some of your analytics here as well. So if I hit select data, for example, I can go and see a whole field of different robot fields and such that I can pull in from Orchestrator to start building out a process. Matter of fact, there's a whole user guide, just like anything else in our product, that tells you what all of these fields mean, right? We call it the Insights data model. You can look it up on the public docs to see what kind of information you can pull and build dashboards on. But that information exists here. So for example, I'll just give you a very quick one. Let's say I want to see process names. You'll see it pulls all my process names. And maybe I want to see the total runtime for each of these processes. So I'll bring in my runtime per runtimes here. It's going to break it down in the most granular seconds here. And then I'll just go ahead and say, let's go put it in a pie chart, right? Now I can see all the processes that I have, and I could go ahead and hit create here. It's going to go ahead and create that widget here down below for me. And what I can do then is I can edit this to be anything else that I want. So for example, here are all the process names. If I'd like to filter this down, I can say, let's do a ranking of only top 5, right? I could do any other sort of text and list type of filters as well here, but we're going to do top 5 by runtime. Now this total runtime, let's say I don't want it in seconds, I want it in minutes. I could divide this by 60, but there's a whole host of other functions, much like you would find if you're doing calculations in Excel, to change the type of formula and calculation that you want presented. So I'll divide this by 60, and now we got this in minutes. And instead of having that, I can go ahead and rename this to runtime in minutes. We can hit the check right there, and I could set top 5 processes by runtime in minutes. And you have all of the ability to go ahead and set any sort of individual filters to this dashboard at that level here to the right. You can also change things like the design, and if you want things like the values to be presented different ways. But if I'm happy with it, I go ahead and hit apply, and you can see how by having those fields available to you, you can quickly create a dashboard that gives you another piece of information and another way to look at your automation program.
So, by the way, there was another question by Dave around how attended bots change reporting. I think Amir showed a little bit of the attended bots. The beauty is that all the bots still, regardless of whether they're unattended or attended, connect to the orchestrator. All the data is in the orchestrator. So yes, you will have different metrics that you want to track with attended bots, as in what type of automations are they running, how often are they running, what's the utilization, how many minutes per automation, things like that. And then you can get all those dashboards in Insights as well. So the attended bots don't particularly change the reporting. The way reporting is done, it's all from the same model, just that you might be looking at slightly different metrics than you would be looking at for particular automation. Interestingly, this Insights also allows you to add some metadata around, what is the cost per transaction, for instance, or manual execution cost per transaction. If you have number of hours saved by transaction, so you can say this transaction takes like this productivity, right? So you could actually take that number and multiply it by another number to get you a dollar value, which I think is they're doing in the goal for year 2020, and time saved and all of these things that you're able to now put in values, metadata around processes right into insights, and then multiply those numbers to with all the other metrics that come out from process execution to get the metrics that you're looking for.
Awesome. All right. So that's pretty much it for insights for now. We're going to revisit this. We could revisit this in another conversation if you guys are interested a little bit more. But the high level is that we have that. One thing I'm going to show actually before I leave the insights piece that I think is important because it's been asked is how do we share these? You can share these any which way, right? You can do this by PDF. Obviously, if you have a viewer's role, you can come in here and look at the dashboards as is if they're shared out to you. And then you have the sharing button right here. So I can go ahead and set this up to be shared as a report, as an attachment. I could go ahead and schedule that, and I can specify who gets these dashboards and reports. So this could be someone like the executives on your team or the business leaders in your group. Okay, so many ways to share this. I can share, also just export these. If I want to share this, let's say another developer, they want to do something with it on their own instance. So I can export, duplicate, share it out to users, have reports scheduled and sent out. And the last thing too is a lot of folks in the ROC, right? They're going to be wanting to know some information that is pertinent. Maybe you want to look at milestones, right? Success rates to celebrate or to be concerned about. So if there's anything here where I'm like, hey, this is something I'd like to track and be alerted on, you can actually click on these and set what we call a pulse alert on these. These pulse alerts allow you to set thresholds. So for example, if I want greater than 98%, let's go ahead and send a group of people a message or an email. I can specify who that goes to and how they get notified, right? You can add a webhook, Slack, Zapier, etc. And once they get alerted, it's like, great, let's have a nice pizza party because we got over 98% success rate. Or let's go the other way, less than 90%, maybe we should be concerned. We need to start looking at fine-tuning our processes. There's probably a little bit more work that we need to do. So you can set up these pulse alerts and they'll all be managed through this pulse icon over here. And I can see what the latest and the history of these pulse alerts look like. So you have that sort of smart alerting capability built in, and you can track those for different metrics that you might be interested in. All right.
Perfect.
So,
that was great, Amir. I think there's a couple of other things, and we got 10 minutes left. That's a good thing that you wanted to talk about in Orchestrator. I think Kyle had talked about how their team uses a combination of Orchestrator and Elastic Kibana for monitoring. Talk a little bit about the inbuilt monitoring capabilities within the Orchestrator. And another, it's my pet, favorite topic, and I was literally jumping in joy when that came out. Q triggers. I think you have something on that as well. So let's talk about those two things because I think they're extremely powerful when it comes to optimizing how your automations run.
Absolutely. Let's switch topics a little bit. So I'm going to move to a different orchestrator here. This is my personal private team one. But with any orchestrator, you'll notice that the first thing that we've done is when you log into an orchestrator, it doesn't matter if it was this one or the other one that I got going on over here. So if I actually click out to the front page, you'll see there's a little dashboard to tell you how things are going live in your environment right now. So I got some things like processes, queues, triggers, users, how many jobs have been successful, which ones have been faulted, if there's any statuses, and if there's any transactions. Now this one doesn't have any, but I created some for this presentation in this environment. So you'll see if I go and take a look, I could see which ones are successful, which ones are faulted, which ones are stopped, and I can drill into this. So we have some pre-built monitoring built into the front page of your orchestrator, if you will. Now, if you are using queues, right, and you'll see that I have some queues over here, you'll notice that when you go into this section called monitoring, you'll see some information about what's been going on. Now, the one cadence with the monitoring processes is that it's basically live, right? So it's looking at basically the last 24 hours. I can see here which ones have been running. This has been my laptop in the last 24 hours, and then what the statuses of those look like. Now, within the queues, if I had anything running in the last day, you'll see the intervals or the last day or last hour here. I can see all the information here. So I uploaded some transaction through a queue, and I could see things like the overview, which ones have been successful. If there was any that faulted, I could see which ones happened there, and then which queues all of those items came through. So this is all coming through a queue called demo queue for me, for example. So you do have the ability to go to your monitoring section in Orchestrator, click on queues, and you can see some high-level information about those queues here as well. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my folder. I set up another queue over here, and we'll take a look at it. I call it my real estate queue. If you're curious what this does, is I have my workflow over here, and basically it says, let's go to a website like Zillow. Let's scrape all the information from it, and let's add that to a queue through this activity called add queue items. So if I go ahead and give that a run, you'll see that in about 4 seconds, what is going to happen is if I go to my queue, over here, I'm going to see some more information pop up. So here's my robot. It's going to Zillow. It could obviously do this in the background. It's going to go ahead and finish that out. And it's going to close it down, and I'm going to have some information populate from that queue. So it's done there. I have my remaining over here. I'm going to get this. We're going to talk about this in a second, because this is actually a trigger that's happening. Now that it sees that there's some information that went in, it's going to go ahead and try to start another bot. So I'll go ahead and view the transactions that I got here, and we'll see we have a bunch of new transactions in. And if I look at the details of those transactions, I could actually see Zillow pulling information from my local neighborhood about new houses, and this information can be passed over to bots for some processing. Now, the important piece that I want to talk about is queue triggers. So with any sort of process, there are ways for us to go ahead and create triggers. You can see for a queue here, the real estate queue that is pulling in all the Zillow information, I can go ahead and hit edit or add a trigger. So if I go to my triggers over here, we'll know that there's always 2 types of triggers. There's a time type of trigger, and there's also what we call queue triggers. Now, when we go to queue triggers, we can specify for which queue, the real estate queue, what happens, right? And in this case, it's a really nice function that says, whenever new items are added to this real estate queue, because you just saw me run that, right? Start another robot, an unintended robot, to go ahead and kick off another process. So why is that important? Because oftentimes when you're getting transactions that are coming into your queue, you probably want another robot to either start a process or start processing some of those things in the queue. And so you can have another process kicked off. So those triggers actually do exist. And it's a way for you to sort of be smart about being proactive when you have items or transactions populating into your queue.
So for those folks who used UiPath before queue triggers were around, or actually use any other platforms as well, generally speaking, it used to be you would waste a robot just watching a queue. So it would be, I used to call it, are you paying your robots to show up or actually do the work? The beauty of a queue triggers, your robots can be doing whatever they're doing, and the free robots can just be triggered when work arrives. It's a really, really great optimization technique. It helps you. So what we generally do, we'll take a dispatcher, for instance, the dispatcher performer model, and take a dispatcher. One dispatcher just watches various inputs, be it emails, be it file drops, or anything like that, looking into a ServiceNow queue to see if there are any tickets to be served, so on and so forth, and creates the items in the right queues. And then those queue triggers just trigger the bots that need to finish that work up. And that's actually, that helps us save a lot of robots that would otherwise be spent in looking for work and not doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. This was something we added, I want to say 20.4, if I'm not mistaken. So, pretty recent, but before that, there was always this time trigger, right? And this is what a lot of folks would use. So it's good to know that this has been added, because now you have another way to be smart about, hey, new transactions are in, let's go start another dispatcher bot, right? To start working on something or doing something with the queue. And you can get away from just scheduling it so that robots come in at different times of the day to do certain tasks. You can still do it that way, right? You have the time triggers, but the queue triggers add a whole nother dimension to it as well.
I think this was great. We're almost at time. I see it's 2:58. Well, if there are any other questions, Deborah, I see you have a few questions. I'm sure Amir will reach out to your account rep and set up some time with you to go through some of those. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to assist with any of these questions. Some of these are usability questions. Would be happy to answer those. If there are any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. info@accelerate.com, my first name, last name, Kyle's first name, last name. However you got the invitation to this webinar, feel free to reach out to the email that got you in here, or LinkedIn. There are multiple channels. Amir, we're excited. We're very excited to have this. I'm glad you were able to give us some time. This was really helpful. I hope everybody else found it very helpful as well. Kyle, thank you very much for giving us an overview of your group. We look forward to speaking to some of the attendees again and seeing you on the last one that we're going to do on this. Keep an eye out for our emails and our LinkedIn posts for information on the last, the 5th part of the 5-part webinar series. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.